content!
Carrying things. Yes, of course.
No, he had his own opinion. Was
Carrying
very
branches.
interesting.
Oh, I was just wondering how Homo erectus evolved into modern human man.
You are not talking about how it became Homo erectus, but how it evolved.
Yeah.
Well, as we started cooking meat, that allowed our brains to grow bigger because we were able to absorb a lot more nutrients.
Can I answer his question?
You may.
So it's about
You
fire.
know what is my ideas of Homo? I'm disturbed by the sound. My idea of Homo erectus is that somehow once you stand, you are more aggressive because you have a different type of energy flowing into your own body. So if I sit, I intend to communicate in a relaxed manner, give and take. But if I stand, I take somehow a more bossy position within the group because I express my feelings of adequacy within the group that might overcome my point and distract the subject matter being discussed.
Yeah, but
So-
baboons are very aggressive, haven't they? They've got fanged teeth and they can walk
So are
on all
lions,
fours.
tigers,
Lions,
bears.
yeah, so-
They're all on all fours.
Yes, well, I am
birds are on
talking,
two
we are
legs.
talking
Related.
about humans, not animals.
We are
humans.
animals. We are animals.
We are to a certain extent.
No, do you know
to a
what?
total extent.
Total extent.
Do you know what Engels said? Whoever thinks that humans are animals have not understood one thing at all whatsoever. And I agree with him because we are a species that have a very strong drive for survival, and that drive for survival is part of our evolution, brain evolution.
Show me a species
into
that doesn't have a
making
drive
tools.
for
Show me a species
survival.
that commits suicide at the rate that humans do.
Yes.
Suicide is a different category. You know, suicide
It's something that humans do
is
that we're not aware of.
usually environmentally induced. My daughter committed suicide, okay? Her suicide, beautiful girl, beautiful, tall, magnificent body, immaculate body. She committed suicide because of the environment and the financial hardships that were put on her. So most of suicides are the result of depression caused by the rat race. So I am very informed about suicide because after she died and I found her hanging in a horrible death. Actually, she made a video before hanging herself and said, "Hello, Mom, I tried to hang myself. It's a very painful death. Very painful. I couldn't go ahead with it because it was
Must take courage.
horrible, painful. But anyway, to die is very painful, and I am going to kill myself this next minute." That's what he said in the video. Bye-bye, Mom. Never said bye-bye to her son. And so I know a lot about suicide,
Was
and
that
I
the
read
mother
a lot.
of the boy that you used to
Yeah,
bring
the
here?
mother of the boy, beautiful girl, beautiful, amazing, tall, you know, very tall, beautiful. She had everything, but she could not cope with hardships because she said this is too competitive, is a very difficult world. She was manageress at Harrods, so it's a very demanding job. Very,
that's like living
lots
in
of
London,
stress.
like-
That's what I was going to say. That's part of it, isn't it, as well? The environment. where you're in.
Yes, yeah, the environment, but
Well, I'm not sure if
usually.
the suicide rates are higher in London or big cities. They're pretty high in rural areas. I
But
think that's
you
where
see, if you
people...
look in the world scale, the highest rate of suicide is in Sweden.
Yes.
Sweden has a
Sweden
very
and Finland
good,
and those
Oh,
countries
Sweden.
yeah,
have very high.
Scandinavia. have a very good provision from the government, so it doesn't make sense. But then I started, because after my daughter died, I looked at every one of these situations, and I found out that the reason why Sweden has such a high suicide rate is because is because they are very proud people. When they become old, they do not want to be a burden to their children. And that is mostly suicides of older people that are too proud and too self-sufficient to be a burden to their children. Watch the movie Pelle the Conqueror. There is this old father that has nothing left but his son to survive in a very difficult, cold environment, and yet he lets his son migrate to United States. This was the beginning of 19th century. This is a true story. Beginning of 19th century, because he said, no, I don't want to be a burden to my son. You know, and implicitly will commit suicide. And you see this phenomenon very common. In United States is very high also, second highest suicide rate in the world. But it's a very competitive society. You know, competition is everywhere. And so I can tell you that, all I can say about suicide. But I want to hear his opinion, for example, why humans, all of a sudden, they develop this strong drive for survival. What would you think?
My bit to say is sometimes, like I always say, a lot of things in life are complex. And when it comes to people's minds, some people are more sensitive to certain things than others. Some people can endure things. Well, they say the race is not for the weak or strong, but for those who can endure it. Maybe there's certain truths in that.
Yes.
But again, it's a very mystical cloud as to behind, you know, suicide and why so many people commit suicide. Again, it's something which we can't fully understand because the mind is so difficult to understand.
Yeah. What about you, Steve?
I worry that the young generation, the millennials, are growing up in such a changed environment now. All on their, you know, they're not out socialising. They're all on their phones and their devices and things. They're wrapped up in cotton wool. They're not developing resilience. I think that's my biggest concern, that our young people, our kids, our teenagers are not growing up resisting and learning from their mistakes and resisting a resilience that not everything's going to go your way. You know, you're going to fail, you're going to lose, you're going to not be successful in everything that you do. And they haven't developed the resilience partly because the system of education has prevent them from losing. No one can lose, everyone must win.
Yeah, you
and
have
I think
to be a winner.
we're wrapping them up in cotton wool, so how are they going to cut it when they actually get out into the big, nasty, grown-up world? Are they going to be able to hack that? Are they going to be able to hack that when they don't get into Celebrity Big Brother, or when they don't become a celebrity overnight and they don't achieve all these stupid things that are thrown at them? They're going to suffer mentally.
So, according to you, we will have an increase in suicide.
I can absolutely predict an increase in suicide. Yeah.
What about you? What do you think?
I think for some people life could be too demanding. Some people can't handle pressure, and so they take the easy way out, suicide.
Yeah, but there is a matter of degree. You know, there are some people that because they have a loving family, I mean, I know out there is cruel, but they still enjoy a family that give them a sense of protection, a sense of security, which means mental stability. So if there is an increase in suicide, it should be the concern of the government, of the institution. The family can only cater for the youngster to a certain point.
I was going to ask you, you know when you said out there is cool, are you more talking about the government's policies towards young people or people in general, or are you on about more everyday people attitude to one another? Is it more a governmental thing or more everyday people, or just both?
No,
or?
I am a Marxist, a communist, Marxist-Leninist, so I believe the fault lies in the institutions, not in people.
Right.
The institutions are those that give top priority to money and power. Actually, they run the institution. Money and power run the institution. So, the fault is not of the population. The only fault of the population is the inability to counteract this state of affairs. But then when you see that when you counteract, like in France, 24 people lost one eye, raise a laser-guided bullet to destroy the eyes of the demonstrators. 11 people lost their lives, were killed by the police and the army.
So what's the solution
So-
then? Just to get cut to the chase, what's the
Well,
solution to it?
The solution is you can overthrow this capitalist system strictly by entering into politics, become an activist.
So you can or you can't.
You can
That's right.
by
Curiously, suicide goes down at times of war. Maybe we
Yeah.
should have a violent revolution.
yeah, exactly. Because it's optimism of
I'm
action.
joking.
Now we live in pessimism of theory. You need optimism of action, not pessimism of theory.
Yeah, you don't need to think about the consequences. Just do it, man, without thinking. Just rebel.
Yeah,
Who cares
that's
if
what-
everything gets fucked up?
No, it's not like that. It's a
It's not like that.
spontaneous outburst of discontent. It's not that you, recklessly, I go in the front line, I get killed, but I will overthrow
So you're talking
capitalism.
about some sort of
It
What
is-
comes next? What comes after capitalism?
What capitalism is a system of concentration, privatization of wealth and resources. You will have a society where the resources belong to self-managed workers' factories.
Who's gonna rule it?
That
Yes, would Corbyn be the
Who's
leader?
gonna
Yeah.
manage it?
The dear leader?
who were the Soviets? Have you ever heard of Soviets?
They were
Were-
totalitarian.
no,
They had a dictator ruling them.
no, Soviets were.
Well, Stalin wasn't a dictator.
Lenin was the dictator. Every single
Cool
other
down,
one wasn't the
cool
dictator.
down.
It will have been worth the
Soviets
millions that died.
were, strictly speaking, managers within the factory. They had the same salary of the ordinary manual worker. There was no.
Not all of them, though, were they? Some of them were driving
Soviet.
around in very big, nice cars, weren't they?
No, you
Not the
talk
ones that were in
about
charge anyway.
the some party leaders, but that was
Some party leaders.
very few, very few.
And then they send their
Probably
kids to Cambridge
Khrushchev
and Oxford to get
and
educated.
definitely Yeltsin, because he was all sold, was a sell-off to United States. But in any case, I have people, Venice is full of Russians. I have them in my house. I have at this moment a Ukrainian lady called Alla Vaschuk. She's from Kiev. I stay in her house in Kiev because she stays in my house, I stay in her house. We make very fair exchange. So
Is she also a socialist?
she said that her parents, grandparents, were never really questioning what was going on because there was a sense of communal life that has been totally dismantled. Now is a rat race, the top dog, the one that is the most arrogant, the most...
That's not the majority of you in Ukraine or Russia, though. is it?
Well,
If it
I'm
was, the
talking
Communist
about
Party
that
would be in
trend.
power, wouldn't they? They can
I'm
vote for the
talking
Communist
about
Party.
that trend.
There's
The
a
trend
trend
is
towards
that
that.
there was a more humane type of communal life that has been wiped off by capitalism.
Of course.
No.
Of course.
I saw
And
in
in
Kiev
that community life, could they travel? Do they have freedom
regularly
of thought? Do they
parading
have freedom of
with
religion?
Nazi flags. Where
Of
did that
course.
come from?
Why are they always so
Of course.
corrupt?
Where does
We
that
should
from?
just
Was there freedom
humanely
of religion?
exterminate
Was there
people
freedom
by the
of
millions
thought?
like the good old
Ask them.
socialists.
You said that those times were good. We were implying
Well,
those
look at
times were
freedom
great.
of religion has destroyed the park. There are a bunch of
So we should ban religion.
bigots that talk absolute utter
So
nonsense.
the solution
such
is
as
to
flat
knock
earth
the churches and the mosques
is
down.
much more interesting, and that's why Heiko is considered the best speaker in the park.
Well, he doesn't
to
have much
listen
competition, does he,
to
really?
Would you not
Heiko, of
In
knock
all
course.
down the
respect.
churches?
Yeah, because you're his fan
No,
girl.
I wouldn't.
Heiko
For
is
example,
good.
North Korea
He
is
is good.
supposed to be communist, is full of Buddhist temples everywhere. China has 250 million Buddhists.
Oh, come on, they don't even allow Falun Gong, let alone
Yeah, do you know about the
Christianity or
Cultural
Islam.
Revolution in China? What they were doing to those Buddhists a while ago, to teachers, to
Well,
intellectuals?
a revolution is what it is, a revolution.
Yeah, a revolution.
A revolution means act of self-defense.
No, a
If
revolution
you-
means
let
the
me
destruction
finish.
of the status quo.
Let me finish.
Not be
Let me
good at what not
finish.
be bad. Go ahead, go ahead.
Let me finish. Revolution is an act of self-defense.
Like the Hong Kong
When-
people
let
against
me
China.
finish.
Let her
Precisely
finish,
like
Let
finish,
me
let her
finish.
You won't like that example.
When
will you?
you have a counteraction to your program of changing the status quo because it's unbearable, you must
Sounds like Hong Kong.
defend yourself against the powers that wants to return to the previous order.
Which is what they're
You
doing in Hong Kong,
are
isn't it?
progress.
You'll
You
never
are
agree with that
modernity.
point, ever.
You do not want anybody to interfere with your goal of burying the old system. What is
Right.
your opinion on this? You are from
Oh, sorry, answer this
Or
one.
Oh,
you
you
should-
she directs the conversation there.
Funny she goes that
Not
way.
for us, but for
Hong Kong. Let's talk about Hong Kong.
Anybody else?
He's,
Hong Kong or China?
probably more informed than me.
No,
I
definitely.
went to China, so
No, I'm English.
I have Chinese in my house, so
You have everyone in
So?
there.
Chinese are everywhere in my house as
Oh,
well.
you know, I had a Chinese girlfriend. That means I know everything about China.
No, you know what's
That's your point.
happened. I have a place in the United States,
So you're,
and
yes, we know you own property all around the world.
Yeah, yeah,
So you
yeah.
were talking about revolution and people
Yeah.
power,
Yeah.
trying to overtake the corrupt powers
I'm
over them.
saying
So
that-
can we talk about Hong Kong? Because that's
Yeah.
precisely what's occurring
no,
in Hong
this is
Kong.
not the
Hong Kong is
subject
haram.
matter. We started this
Fighting for their
meeting
rights.
So you don't want to
with
talk about
the
Hong
Kong is
Kong.
haram,
idea
man. She can't
of
talk about it.
explaining what is that
So that's inconvenient
made
to your
human
narrative, isn't
being
it?
evolve.
Speaking of
that
haram,
was
what
the
about the
subject
Uyghurs?
matter.
Yes.
Because this goes in the internet. In the internet, they will put a title, and the title is not your sensibilities about Hong Kong and communism. It's about how humans evolve and how they relate to each other for the survival of the species. We have a very strong for survival. For example, African, I would say, have the best drive to survival. They will be 2 billions in Africa in the next 2050. Will be 2 billions. Now they are over 1 billion. But why, in a situation where they have elite that are very vicious, very corrupt, they sell everything to US, to the Western world, and they make their people starve to death. The biggest killer of African women
Wait, that's
is
China.
to cook on open fire. So,
Childbirth, actually, I think.
and they still keep on growing exponentially as a race because they have an amazing drive to survival. And you know how
Actually, it's
they
more
develop
Lack of childbirth.
you know how they
isn't it?
develop
Birth
this
control.
Lack of
strong,
female education.
strong
Yeah.
drive to survival? You know how? You have, look for example in nurseries, child caring, even in the hospital, a lot of Africans from Africa, some born here, but they are very caring for children. They are the best babysitters. Even in Saudi Arabia, they hire Africans babysitters because they are the best.
Well, not
they
cheap,
don't.
not
And
cheap
they
labour.
have a very
on.
Where does
strong,
that information come from?
Africans
very-
make good babysitters.
strong.
That's such a
They're entitled to
stereotype.
have their opinion.
That is such a
So why is it
stereotype.
okay for you to stereotype, but it's not okay
They
for other
are
people to
very
stereotype,
caring
particularly on the
for
basis of
children.
race?
Okay, lady, if you apply
very
a positive quality to a whole race, it's the same as applying a negative quality
No,
to the whole race.
I'm not
it means you're
applying
giving
any
importance to
positive
race.
quality.
Yes, so they're good babysitters.
I am trying to explain
I'm sure there's good babysitters, but
why
I'm sure there's also bad
Africans
babysitters.
are increasing
Africa.
exponentially compared to Europeans. We are only 19% a white race. Why we are dwindling and they are growing? There
we're not
must
having
be
children.
something right that they are doing.
Because we're
You
not
know?
having
Poor
children.
countries have
Something
more
must be
children.
right somewhere.
People in
I've
poor
been
countries have more children.
complicated.
Well,
lady.
I can say that they are good with children. They are caring for children. Look
that's
at
why
the
they
way
have the
the
highest child
children
mortality
of
in the
black
We're not always so
people
good at
are.
caring after old people. Haven't you
The
seen any of the
children
hidden
of black
video
people,
footage of
all
care
wearing
assistants?
nice dress, all nice, beautiful hair, beautiful.
Okay,
you know,
now you're
make
just
very pretty.
Yeah, yeah.
As if it was something that is a little
You sweet
jewel
talker,
that
you.
you have to care and take, So this
No,
is
just licking the boots of the Africans.
what the discussion was about. Why we or some races have a higher
talking about racism.
capability of survival than others. That's
That's
all
how
it
it
is
is. It's
about.
not about
Having
race.
lots of babies.
But survival is
not
a
the same
It's
as
about the
survival.
society, about
So you cannot take survival out of an environment.
the organization in the society.
Yeah.
So for example, the Eskimos are geared towards the survival in those conditions. So if you take an Afghan, for example, to the North Pole, you wouldn't be able to survive. Or if you take an Eskimo to Afghanistan, you wouldn't be able to survive. So it's increasingly linked to the environment in which they live.
Yeah, but at the moment I was referring to an identity because from my point of view, I believe that identity politics is wrong, is toxic, and is very reactionary. But I make an exception for Latinos that were butchered by the Spaniards.
Except for her group.
And they have an identity, not Latino, I mean Native Americans.
Not Latinos.
Okay?
Fuck those
And
guys.
they
Only
have
Native Americans.
Don't be vulgar and don't use the F word.
Oh, the F
please.
word's horrible.
This is a civilized
It's
meeting.
horrible.
Please
horrible.
don't use the F word. When you
okay,
use
let's
the
keep it
F
up.
word, you
Okay.
tend to bring
Okay, I'm sorry to
tension.
the audience because I
You
gave her an
bring-
excuse to escape all of the blunders that she's made in her speech. Because now
But
she can
that is
focus
your
about me saying the
opinion.
F word.
We are not interested in your opinion.
Who's we?
You might not be interested.
The royal we.
These guys
This
are.
gentleman was saying the survival drive depends from the environment. And I
course.
would say why certain races have more of this survival that we have lost. We as a white race have lost this drive for
You're
survival.
joking, right?
Because we are
having
dwindling.
less
Must be
children.
joking.
It's very
lady.
interesting.
We
I
have
would
Whites are not
less
only in
children.
Western Europe, you know. There's whites around the world. There's
would-
whites in Brazil, in South America, in Eastern Europe, and they don't have the same ideology as Western Europeans.
In any case, the white race is in decline.
Yeah, you see,
That
you only
is
speak about
everywhere.
race.
Not
You're saying the whole
If
white
I may
race.
try to
The white
answer
race
that.
doesn't share the same ideals.
If I may, well, on one level, there's no such thing as race. On one level, but let's just assume that there is such a thing as race. There's an element of what you say which is true, and you can compare that, for example, to the fall of the Roman Empire. How did the Roman Empire rise, and why, and how did it fall? Now, the Roman Empire, it became extremely powerful, and when empires become
Cold for
extremely
ice cream.
powerful and they become corrupt, they usually rot from within. They usually rot from within. Because when a country is very hungry in the beginning of an empire, it's very hungry to conquer, to do the things that it wants to, and then when all the wealth comes to it, the wealth usually corrupts a culture or a country. And we saw that with the Roman Empire. Now we're seeing that with the American Empire. People are getting lazy there because people are getting lazy there and it's rotting from within. You've got corruption, you've got police going around shooting black people, you've got America acting as bullies. Whereas 50 years ago, 60 years ago, the energy about it was different. America saw itself as a savior of the world. It gave troops to the rest of the world, it gave massive aid to the rest of the world, but then it got corrupt. So I would say wealth causes a kind, too much wealth eventually causes a kind of degeneracy. And that's usually how most empires form. They become degenerate because they rot from within. The same thing happened with the British Empire. It rotted from within.
But why wealth and prosperity makes people weak? That is what bothers me. Why? We should become stronger because we are better fed, we are better educated, we have more amenities.
Okay, guys, I think there might be a more interesting conversation just near us. What do you think it's about?
You are the son.
Performing to the
You are
camera.
the son. You are
From Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. Listen.
Nobody. You bastard.
You see this guy said, you shall know them by their fruit. That's the fruit of Islam. He's called me bastard. Did I call him bastard? No.
You are bastard.
No. We are. No.
Don't interrupt me.